Morning. My name, hey y'all, I'm Chef Amethyst Ganaway. I am a chef, food writer, and cultural curator born and raised in the great state of North Charleston, South Carolina. It is my pleasure today to share some space with Miss Anita Singleton Prather, Miss Anita?
Prather.
Prather,
Prather. Mhm.
affectionately known as Aunt Pearly Sue, and that's what I will be referring to you as in the rest of our
Okay, that
conversation
works for
today.
me.
Miss Aunt Pearly Sue is a storyteller and educator and the founder of Gullah Folk Traveling Theater. She has been bringing Gullah stories to life across the country and the world, and now she's back with a brand new production, The Gullah American Revolutionary Experience. Aunt
Yeah.
Pearly Sue, thank you for being here with us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me, honey. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time for the old lady. Um,
Hey, listen, gotta make time for our community.
yes, yes,
Yes,
yes,
ma'am.
yes.
So we're gonna kick off this interview a little with a little background about you. I want you to tell the people about who you are, with the work that you do. Obviously, I just gave you a very brief introduction, but you have been doing this work, this cultural work, for probably definitely longer than I've been alive.
Mhm.
So let the people know about you and what you do.
Okay. Well, born and raised right here in Beaufort, South Carolina. Um, it was known as the Queen of the Sea Islands. Beaufort, South Carolina was, and went away to college, to Howard University, got a degree in psychology, came back, got an education degree, taught for about 20 plus years. Uh, Work in my church, was born and raised up in First African Baptist Church, and was a musician there, played the organ and wrote the plays, and sort of became a youth minister. And now I am a minister with New Covenant Fellowship Ministries, based out of Green Pond, South Carolina, and we have a satellite church here in Beaufort. So, a mother of three, grandmother of nine. Uh, Always been involved in the community. My parents were part of the civil rights movement, so that's very dear and near to my heart. My paternal grandfather was born in 1875, only 10 years out of slavery, um, in Colleton County on Cherokee Plantation. Was one of the first graduating. He was in one of the first graduating classes of South Carolina State University. My aunt, his oldest daughter, was a second generation. So my grandfather came back to Cherokee Plantation, started a school there in Colleton County, on that plantation, then came over to Beaufort County, bought property in the Seabrook area. And my aunt ran the school over here. And he was also a farmer. So he exported a lot of his crops to New York and Philadelphia, uh, um, DC, Chicago. My dad and uncle were graduates of Tuskegee Institute. They were both military. My dad was in the Navy, my uncle was in the Army. Um, so a lot of roots there. And then on my mother's side, she was a first generation college graduate out of Savannah State. And she was the eldest of 11 on her dad's side and an only child on her mother's side. And my grandmother, they called her Miss Rosa. She wasn't Rosa Parks that you would kick off the bus. She was Miss Rosa that would have hijacked the bus. When you see a Tyler Perry play Medea, that was my grandmother 101% every day. She worked for the Christensen family. They were abolitionists that came down in the late 1700s. And she never called them Miss Helen, Miss Winnie. It was Helen, Winnie, get out my kitchen. Don't you open that oven, make my cake fall. Get on out, out, call you when the food ready. And she didn't play. She was about 5'1", busty, uh, full figured. Everything was always immaculate on her. Everything was pressed to the, I mean, everything was pressed, pristine. She was an excellent seamstress, cook. She could hunt. She could crab, fish, you name it. My grandmother did it. Um, would build her own shed in the back, garden in the back. I never remembered us buying um, vegetables or seafood from out of a store It either was caught or grown. And and she preserved everything, you know. And she was, I guess she would have been my biggest mentor, was my grandmother, Rosa. We called
Yes,
her
ma'am.
Ronnie growing up. But yeah, that sort of, it was 8 of us, uh, 5 girls and 3 boys growing up. And so I grew up in a big family. First cousins, and you know, everybody became aunt somebody or cousin somebody.
Yeah.
Very seldom called anybody by their name who was older than you were. So very close community. And came back home from DC when I graduated from Howard and started working back in the community with young people. And sort of started again, picked up where I stopped off when I went away to college, started writing plays again. And here I am, some 40, 50 years later.
What an incredible story, and an incredible lineage to come from as
Mhm,
well. What a
mhm,
wonderful thing. So let's talk a little bit more. You already started talking about the foodways.
mhm,
And there's so much that you said that obviously resonates with me growing up in the low country as
mhm,
well. Now, I grew up going crabbing and going fishing, and now obviously we go to the fish market, and you can go to the,
mhm,
grocery store and get the stuff, whatever ingredients that you need for a meal that day. But um, I like to let people know that a lot of the traditions that my elders grew up with still live with us here in the low country. And I think that's
mhm,
something that is so beautiful and so special. Like
mhm,
I'm still, I get to exchange. My friends have gardens, right? And they'll come over and they'll bring me their squash and their zucchini and all the
mhm.
tomatoes and okra and everything, just the
Yeah,
same way when I grew up. Your neighbor or your cousins or
mhm.
your family would bring you, man, I got this pecan tree in my yard. I'm coming to bring you a bag of pecans, right?
Right,
But
right.
let's talk a little bit more about that, and how is Gullah food, how has it been Gullah culture and Gullah food? How has it been so resilient throughout the centuries? And how do you feel about the legacies and the lineages of our foodways and our culture, and how they translate from
Mhm,
the past centuries ago
mhm.
to what you see now?
Yeah. I think one of the things we forget in the midst of struggles is that struggles bring out our creativity, because you have to be creative to survive such a horrible thing, such as the transatlantic slave trade. And even though it was evil and wicked, and not to ever take any of that away from what it was, it's also a testament to how resilient we are and how strong we are as a people.
Yes,
And that's
ma'am.
one of the messages we have to continue to give to our young people, that failure is not an option, because that struggle is what birthed this beautiful Gullah Geechee uh, culture that we celebrate today. I started cooking, I guess, between 3 and 4. My grandmother had me standing on a 3-legged stool that she had in her kitchen. She had 2 stoves. She had the old wooden stove in her kitchen as well as a gas stove. And yeah, between 3 and 4, I was up. She started me stirring and tasting, and so it became second nature for me. And like you, either you grew it in the back or somebody else grew it in their backyard or in their field and brought something. And they called her Cousin Rosa. Cousin Rosa, I got you a bushel of beans. Cousin Rosa, I got you some potatoes here. Cousin Rosa, I got some peanuts, grunnuts, they would call it, ground nuts. And so it was always something. Saturday mornings would be about 30 of my relatives would gather at our house, and we would go down toward the beach, Hunting Island Beach, to the lagoon. And the lagoon was where they dug dirt to re-nourish the beach shores at Hunting Island Beach. And so that lagoon would be the perfect place for shrimp and whitings and yellowtail and spots would go there. And so my grandmother, my grandaunts, my uncles, I mean, it would be a whole tribe of us would go. And the young children, we would, with my grandmother and grandaunts, we would have the crab lines with the chicken necks and throw that out and the dip nets. And then my mother, the women The other women, the younger women, would be casting. They would have the rods, the fishing rods, and my dad and the older boys and my uncles and those would have the shrimp nets, casting the shrimp nets. So by the time I was, I guess maybe about 10 or 11 or 12, I knew how to cast a shrimp net. Didn't ever get fishing was too boring for me, but I loved crabbing and I loved casting the shrimp net. And so by the time we would get ready to leave, I can remember my uncle's truck we would run out of buckets. And so we would put the tailgate up and we would end up dumping all the crabs. So if you can just imagine a whole truckload, seriously, a truckload of crabs and buckets of shrimp. And I mean, they would be huge, 3 inches, huge jumbo shrimp. And then they would all come back to my mom's house. The kids, our task was heading the shrimp. The women would start cleaning the fish. Daddy and those uncles and those would gather the wood and stuff to start boiling the crabs. And my mother would go in the house and put on a pot of red rice and rolls and start frying the fish just as fast as they could get it clean. She'd have them fried the shrimp. Shrimp, fried the fish. She put shrimp in the red rice, sweet peas, and everybody would eat and eat and eat. And what you didn't eat, everybody left there with fresh seafood and a belly full and a day well spent. And that's part of my legacy. And so coming up with Gullah dishes, it was if you went in the cupboard and you said, well, okay, I want to put on a pot of rice, and you may not have had this or that. Well, you got some juice left from some neck bones. So now that rice becomes neck bone rice. Yeah. Or you had some juice left from baked chicken. Now that becomes chicken perlo. The red rice, sometimes my mother would have the sausage and the shrimp in it. Sometimes it would just be the sausage in it. It depended on what you had. So when people ask me for a recipe, I tell them, I said, well, I can tell you what I put in it, on yesterday. Now that might not be what I'm gonna put in it tomorrow. I might fry some bacon and have some bacon grease, and gives it a new flavor. And so it's a culture of cooking, of just creative cooking, culinary, because it changes. And I think it's so exciting. And I think that's what makes our food so appealing.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So you touched on a couple of things I want to bring up. One, I think, is the sense of communal cooking and how central that is to our culture, right? I always try to tell people, I said, it could be somebody baby shower. We want to know who made the meatballs. It could be somebody repast. Well, who made the potato salad? It could be Tuesday and we bored and we just want some crab today. But we are very much a communal group of people who come together around a table. And for me, that is an integral part of African culture that we retained here, right? Yes. So I wonder if you feel similarly how I do, where when I hear people say, all of our food comes from, we only had the scraps left of what what our masters gave to us. We had to make something out of nothing, and that's all we had. I try to let people know that while that is true in many cases, I personally feel like it's only a half truth for us, especially being Gullah Geechee in a low country, because we took the knowledge that we had before coming to America, the knowledge that we were forcibly brought here because we had, and we were able to retain so much of our culture and our foodways specifically because we were out, in these spaces on this land where, the average person wouldn't live, but we were used to that already, right? We knew how to work the land and how to utilize what we had around us. And because we were so isolated in many cases, we retained that communal aspect of our community, but then we also were able to provide sustenance for ourselves, right? So we were able to go fishing and go hunting and have our own gardens and grow a lot of these these ingredients that were brought, right? So our okra, our watermelon, our bene, yams, right? All of these
Mhm.
things that I think people see as just a part of Southern food. I think I think that there's been a like an agenda out almost
Mhm.
to make people think that our food is inherently bad, that it just came from a place of just struggle, right? What are your takes on that? And especially, as you talk about the way that you grew up, how do
Mhm.
you kind of view that idea?
Now they call it organic, when we just call it raising crops. My grandmother didn't use chemical fertilizer. It was the ashes out of her potbelly stove. It was the cow, manure. So now they call it organic, and they charge you 10 times more. When it was just the way we did things.
That's right.
Fresh herbs, wild herbs, out of the woods. It was there, and that's what we use. So what they're calling, just even now what they're calling holistic medicines and stuff like that's what we had.
That's
So,
right.
they put a different name on it, and then they jack up the prices, and they make it think like if they discovered something. It's something we've been doing for centuries.
That's
And
right.
so again, it's up to us to remind our young people, this is who we are. We are creative people. We come from the creator. So he didn't expect us to do everything alike, but we could look at something. Somebody said, well, girl, I'm hungry. Okay, well, give me 30 minutes. I'll have you
That's
something
right.
to eat. And I go in my cabinet, I look and I see, and I pull, blah, blah. I say, okay, blah, blah, blah. I say, girl, what's that, child? That's a throw together something. But girl, that sure is good. The next thing you know, it's on somebody's menu, and they charging them $65 a plate. Shrimp
That's
and
right.
grits. Like,
Listen,
oh
don't
my
get me
God.
started.
Oh my God. Shrimp and oh my gosh. We had that every week, sometimes
That's right.
twice a week, shrimp and
Yep.
grits. And if either was shrimp and grits, crab and grits, oyster and grits, fish and grits,
Shrimp and
chicken and grits,
rice.
I mean, everything.
Yep.
The fried chicken on Sunday, and we had leftover chicken, fried chicken. Then my daddy would get up the next morning. He would slice up some onions, put that chicken in it, put a little water in it, simmer it down, and that went over grits. And so now
That's
we
right.
got chicken and grits. Or we had fried pork chops the night before. The next day, next morning, you get up, you put a little water in it, little onions, make a little gravy. That goes over them. So we are creative people, and we don't ever need to make drop our heads in shame. We don't ever need to think that what we've created is secondary to anything. I hear people talk about, well, that's a French chef. Well, guess what? I'm a Gullah chef. How about
That's
that?
right. That's right.
And your French cooking isn't any better than my Gullah cooking.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
and so we need to stop making excuses. We don't have to explain ourselves, and we need to quit worrying that we have to explain to people, make people understand. If they don't understand, it don't even matter.
That's right.
When we get to the place that we realize that our culture is rich, it's worthy of legacy and honor, but we don't have to justify it to anyone.
That's right. That's
And so
right.
that's where I am with that, Connie.
Yes, ma'am. We on the
Mhm.
same page. We on the same page. All right.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about the Gullah American Revolutionary experience. I know you have a little bit of some food history in there as well, so we're gonna hop
Mhm.
back into that. But tell the people what this story is about. How did it come to you? And then I'm gonna kind of tie some more context in on the food on at the end of it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we got a grant that they wanted, the 250th anniversary committee for the southeastern region and for South Carolina and all over America. Really, they're celebrating, getting ready to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution and America's independence. And so I had done, most of the shows that musicals that I've written has basically been around, the Civil War, the beginning, prior to the Civil War era, that Reconstruction era, and civil rights. And so when the 250th anniversary sort of approached us about, could you come up with a play, a musical that will talk about the Gullah Geechee experience during that period? Because a lot of people sort of gloss over that, and I was guilty as charged. And so I knew some basic history, some real shallow history, I would say, but I hadn't done extensive research on the connection of the Gullah. And I knew we were there. The reason why they came and got us was because of our expertise in rice.
Right.
And so I knew we were part of it. Indigo, Eliza couldn't have done nothing with no indigo. She wouldn't work in the fields. So all, you knew was there, but I just hadn't done, I wanted names to go. I just didn't want to tell a generic story. I wanted specific names. And that was hard to find. And so I got a little frustrated. In fact, a group of us, about 5 of us, went to Barbados because I knew there was a direct link to Barbados and South Carolina. In fact, they're getting ready to do a big thing again real soon in Charleston. But, South Carolina was known as a colony of a colony. The same Lord proprietors that colonized Barbados came and colonized Charlestown. That became the first town in South Carolina. Yes. Beaufort is the second oldest, 1711. So I said, well, let me start there, because I had been part of a project that they had back in 2007, 2008 called The Connection, which took about 76 of us to Barbados to see this, to get sort of immersed in the connection. So I said, well, I'll start there. That I did know. So we went and went around to talk to Dr. Carter, who was, he's a professor of history there at the University of the West Indies. Spoke with him. Dr. Carl Watson, who was Professor Emeritus that I met back in the early 2000s, was sick. In fact, he had just recently passed when I got there. Then another gentleman that I met with Dr. Watson, Mr. Trevor Marshall, who was a musician, singer, and he was our tour guide when we were there in 2008, was also sick. And he died maybe about 3 weeks after we came back. So started there. And I still got a few names over there. And one of the names that came up was this gentleman by the name of Qua, Q-U-A-W. And he was sort of the counterpart of Denmark Vesey from Charleston. And they both were sort of contemporaries. Both had tried to organize an insurrection of the enslaved Africans there in Barbados, here in Charleston, South Carolina. And both of them were snitched on by other enslaved Africans. Denmark Vesey by a male and Qua by a female. And so, the story of Denmark Vesey getting executed there. Well, Qua, they were trying to get him to tell who were his partners in this insurrection. And he refused to do it. So they threatened him with roasting him alive. We're going to roast you if you don't tell us. And his famous quote was, if you roast me today, you won't roast me tomorrow. And so he never gave up the information. Mm. And so that was intriguing to me, that kind of power that he refused to give even in the face of death, he did not give up his power of, you don't get to tell me what to tell you.
That's right.
Yeah, you kill me today, but guess what? You can't kill me tomorrow.
That's right.
And so that really got me to digging. And what I had to realize, I said, you know what? let me start looking at these iconic figures in American history that represents the Revolutionary War period. People like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Eliza Lucas Pinckney and Charles Pinckney and all of these different people that white folks that you hear about, quote unquote. Behind every, they say behind every great man is a great woman. I said, well, behind every so-called great patriot, there's some great Black folks behind them. And in doing so, that's how I was able to discover people like Squash. His name was Quash. And after he got baptized, he named himself John Williams. And he was part of the Wapu plantation that Eliza Lucas at the time. She was only 16 when she took over her father's plantation. And he was one of 20 able-bodied enslaved Africans on that plantation. And she, being a young girl, they came from Antigua over here. And the father brought them here because there were some problems over there with the Spaniards, with the British. And so he brought his family to South Carolina. His father had left him 3 plantations. And so soon he left to go back. When they first got here, Eliza's mother passed. So Eliza, being the oldest at 16, sort of took on the motherly role. And especially when her father had to go back to Antigua, she took over his plantations. They used to send the girls to London, and they would study music and literature and writing, and art. But botany had just started becoming popular, and she was very interested in botany. So when she came back to the plantation, her dad started sending her seeds, and she started experimenting. And indigo was one of the things she started experimenting with. And she was doing okay with it. But again, she wasn't growing that indigo by herself. It took a lot of manpower to do those fields. And so her father, in order to extract that, you had to put it in vats. And the vats that they were using were red clay brick vats. And so the red clay was leaking into and compromising the color of the indigo. So the father sent a gentleman from the Caribbean over to help her. Well, that guy came and he sabotaged her because the Caribbean was selling indigo at the time. And so he went back and so sent another one over. And they realized, and finally the father said, you know what? Let me talk to Squash. Squash was a master carpenter. And he had Squash to build vats out of timber. That made the difference. His expertise made the difference and turned that indigo into blue gold for them. And then she was able to compete with the Caribbean and became one of the premier sought after indigo supplier in the world, and especially over in England. Then you had people like George Washington, our great founding father, that had over 300 slaves. And one of them he had was Ona Judge. She was a young woman. And Martha decided, that's his wife, Martha decided that they wanted to give Ona as a gift to their granddaughter for a wedding present. And Ona got whiffed of it, and they were staying in, they were building the White House, but it hadn't been completed. And so they were in Philadelphia, and Philadelphia was the hotbed to abolitionists, the abolitionist movement. And so George and Martha was trying to keep face by not appearing to be against it so much. And so what they would do, the law was if you had an enslaved person for longer than 6 months, then you had to give them their freedom. So what our founding father would do every 6 months, they would rotate their enslaved Africans back to their Virginia plantation. And then by the time they would come back, then the 6 months period would start over. So when owner heard that they were going to give her to the granddaughter, who was not known to be very kind, she ran away. So he was so obsessed with her running away, he just couldn't understand how she could be so ungrateful. And he wrote about it in his own words. This is not somebody putting words in his mouth. This is his own writing. He wrote this letter to the treasurer of the secretary of the treasury, and said, the ingratitude. We treated her more like a child than a servant. She will not escape impunity if it's all possible. I mean, he wanted her to pay for escaping such a great life. And she was able finally to escape to, I think she ended up going to Rhode Island. And even 3 years after all of that happened, he kept sending bounty hunters to find her. And finally, he sent his nephew to her house. They found out where she was. And by this time, she was married. Her husband was out to sea. She had a 1-year-old son. And so when she heard the knock at the door, she thought it was a neighbor. She opened the door, and it was George Washington's nephew. And George had told him, talk real nice to her, let her know, just tell her we're not going to punish her. We just want her to come back. And he gave the nice little spiel, and she just looked at him. She said, no. And she refused to come back. And she lived 50 years. But that's our founding father. And a lot of things people don't know, that 50 out of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, 41 of them were slave owners. And we don't even need to go on Thomas Jefferson, but Sally Hemings and James Hemings. And George Washington had another one by the name of Harry Washington, that was one of his enslaved Africans that escaped and joined the British and ended up in Nova Scotia after the war, and eventually he went to Sierra Leone. So those are the kinds of stories that we bring alive in this. We put names to faces of the Africans that we knew that were there, that supported these families, be it as servants or fought on either side, because both sides promised them freedom, and both of them reneged a lot of times. So when they ask us what side was we actually fighting on, we were fighting on the red side, the British side, or the blue side, the Continental or the Patriots, we were fighting on the side of freedom, whichever one we thought that would bring us freedom, and we thought it was worth fighting for. So that's the story that we bring alive in this new. It was one of the hardest ones that I've had to write, because you have to look at all these so-called heroes that everybody's going to celebrate in 2 days on the 4th of July and say, might have been your hero, but he wasn't my hero.
Yes, ma'am.
And who do you really call the patriot? The one who fought knowing that the masters had money to pay to make me fight in his place. And I fought even knowing that I would possibly return back to slavery. The swamp fox, they had him, Disney had a big thing about Francis marrying the swamp fox and how brilliant he was. Well, he had Oscar Marion, that fought right for 7 years. And as soon as he finished, the war was over, he returned him back to slavery. So, a lot of those stories we bring alive on stage through this new production.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Are there any sites along the Gullah Geechee corridor, or any sites in particular that people could go to learn more about the ties between the Gullah Geechee and Black folks and their history in the Revolutionary War?
Oh, sure. You have, just any plantation that would have been around that time. Black folks was there. We were there.
Yeah.
Even the ones that they didn't give names to. The story of Priscilla, the young Sierra Leonean that was kidnapped in 1756. In fact, she is the narrator in our play, that ended up on the ship Hare, and Hare, and ended up on Elias Ball's plantation. And the Balls had, I forget, over 1,000 something enslaved Africans. And so her story that can be traced to Tomlin Martin Polite, that still lives in the Charleston area. So we talking about what, 8, 9 generations from Sierra Leone, West Africa to Charleston today, 2025. So that you have the Sheldon Church ruin that's in Beaufort County. You have the St. Helena Episcopal Church that was founded in 1712. Where the Well Branch Middle School is, and Well Branch Elementary School, right there near the Well Branch Bridge coming into Beaufort County. That was a Revolutionary War battle took place right there. The Battle of Grace Hill, just about a couple of miles from there. Everywhere you look around, there is a place that represents part of that history. You come over on St. Helena Island, you have the Chapel of Ease that was built, part of the St. Helena Episcopal Church, for those plantation owners that lived on St. Helena Island, that you actually had to take a boat to go into town. So that's still there. So it's a lot of different places that they can see evidence of the Gullah experience with the Revolutionary War.
Yes, ma'am. I got two quick things I want to bring up. One is, when people often come to the Low Country and they get, to walk around, whether they go to Savannah, they come to Charleston, they go to Beaufort. A lot of people leave, or tell me that they leave feeling very heavy, right? And feeling very morose, right? Like, and for me, that's it's an interesting experience to hear that from people. And I attribute a lot of it because when we grew up in it, right? We grew up in this history and in this knowledge. And as heavy as it is, I always tell people I want them to walk away from these, whether you go to visit a plantation, whether you walk down Rainbow Road, when you walk down those cobblestone streets, and you can see the fingerprints of the enslaved people in the bricks, that they should walk away feeling a sense of pride.
Pride, yeah.
Right? So how do you want people, when they come and they see this play, how do you want them to walk away feeling?
I want them to know that we didn't give up. Great grandmama didn't give up. Great granddaddy didn't give up. So you can't give up.
That's right.
We may have some we have some issues, some struggles, but failure is not an option. Had they given up, we would not be here.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't get to give up. Life took its best shot at us, as evil as it can be sometimes, but we're still here.
That's right.
Not victims, but victoriously, we're still here. We didn't just survive, we continue to thrive. If something is not worth killing, if it has no value, why the struggle? Why the fight? Why all the opposition? That's an email, that's a text, that's a memo to you to tell you how much greatness is in you.
Yes, ma'am.
Not that we're going to be great. We already are. The Moors is what civilized Europe. They were in caves. The Africans came and spread knowledge. People keep thinking that we're just recipients of knowledge. We came and we brought knowledge.
Absolutely.
They didn't come get us from Africa because we didn't know anything. They came and got us for what we did know and what we continue to know. And they keep trying to bury it. They can try to erase it. They can take down the monuments. It ain't going nowhere. We baby kids. We don't die. We multiply.
That's right.
So stop feeling sorry for us. I get sick and tired of hearing Black folks say, well, they didn't teach me that. Well, guess what? Jewish people, you don't ever hear them say that. You don't hear Hispanics say that. You don't hear Native Americans. You don't hear Asians. Nobody else are looking for their oppressors to teach them about their greatness like we do. We keep looking for other people to tell us who we are. It don't matter what they think we are. I don't even care. I don't even care what Black folks think I am. I know who I am. I'm comfortable in my skin, and nobody can take that away from me.
Yes, ma'am.
And so when we get to the place where we understand that what people who don't understand really don't matter, because who matter will understand.
That's right. Amen. Amen. All right. Where can people catch the full show? How can they get tickets? And for people who maybe can't make your play in person, how can they support you in the work of the Gullah Kinfolk Traveling Theater?
Well, thank you so much for asking that question.
Yes, ma'am.
First, you can go to our website, gullahkinfolk.org, gullahkinfolk.org, and our tickets on sale there. If you happen to know some of our Gullah Kinfolk performers, you can call them. They have tickets available, hard copy tickets available. You can also check at the door just before, because our full stage production is going to be Saturday, July 19th. And it's a whole experience because we'll start, even though we have a 2:00 show and a 6:00 show. But the day starts at 12 because we'll have Gullah artisans out there that'll be doing artist demonstrations, and they'll have products that you can purchase. We'll have rice tasting because rice was the reason why they came looking for us from the rice countries like Sierra Leone and Senegal and Gambia and Togo, all those rice producing countries. So we'll have a rice tasting. So you'll get to taste some of the different rice dishes that, we create. I was sitting in my bed this morning thinking about it. I said, you know what? I think I'm gonna make some okra rice, and then I'm gonna make some chicken perlo rice, and we got some red rice coming in, some peas and rice coming. So, you get a chance to taste some of the different rice dishes. So it will be an experience. We don't want you to just come and sit and watch a play, but we want you to get a chance to experience some of what it was like during that time period. And like I said, call, and on that same website, if you decide you want to donate, because we are a 501c3 nonprofit, you can donate on the web page as well. You can always find us on Facebook, Pearly Sue, Gullah Kinfolk. So yeah, check us out. Check us out. Please come. Please come. It's going to be, like I said, this one is a little different. I throw a little humor in there because it's some of it is a bitter pill to swallow. And sometimes humor helps you at least hear. And not that we want to change anybody's minds, but we just want people to just hear some of the truth. A piece of truth becomes a whole lie. And so if you just hear one side, then that's really not the truth. So you've heard the other side for all these years. Now let's hear the other side of it. And it's not this, because I'm not angry at anybody. History is what it is. What happened to you yesterday is your history. Good or bad, it's your history. So you can't really put a value on history happening. But hopefully there are lessons that we can learn from the history that we don't have to repeat the evils and duplicate the good. That's what we want to do. And so, yeah, we're here. We're not going anywhere. And I want our children to know that do not give up. Yes, things are hard. It is not going to be easy, and it's okay, because that's how you build muscles. You don't build muscles if you sit and you just do like this. That's not building muscles. You build muscles because there's friction, there's restraints that makes you use those muscles. And as you use it, then it makes you stronger. So our struggles are not here to destroy us, even though that may be the intentions of those that put that on us. But God is going to use it for our good and build our muscles, our spiritual muscles, our cultural muscles, our physical muscles, our economic muscles.
Amen. Yes, ma'am. All right, y'all. So if you're listening, don't forget, you can go and see the Gullah American Revolutionary Experience on July 19th at the May River Theater in Bluffton, South Carolina. There is a festival that day. So like Aunt Pearlie Sue said, make sure y'all get there early. Go ahead and buy your tickets now so you ain't got to stand outside in the heat and line waiting, but it's going to be worth it regardless. And if y'all want to follow me, y'all can make sure y'all follow me at waterwhipping.com or at my Instagram at ThisG. I do have a cookbook coming out in 2027 called From the Rooter to the Tutor. It's an exploration of Black Southern foodways. So y'all make sure y'all stay tuned for that as well. Pearlie Sue, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure me and you should be in touch.
Yes, ma'am.
And now that I know where to come down to Bluffton to, I hope that I get to see you on July 19th to see this amazing play come to life.
And I just want to say to you and Michelle and the other young people that's keeping the leg, I am so proud of you all. You know, people always say, well, what's going to happen to it? It's in good hands. And so I thank God for you. And I just pray blessings upon blessings, that he will bless you exceedingly abundantly above all you can think, act, ask, or even imagine. Amen.
Amen.
And El Shaddai's name. Amen.
Amen. All right, y'all. Let us know if y'all have any other questions. But outside of that, Aunt Pearlie, so you have a wonderful rest of your day and a good week. And I hope to see you soon.
All right. God bless you, sweetheart. Bye-bye.
All right. Take a good one.